My family took me to New York just to be their event planner. At the hotel, they booked a suite for 3. I asked the front desk, "Is there a cot for me?" My dad said, "Oh, she'll sleep in the closet like last time. She likes it cozy." I never expected to feel invisible at my own family's gathering. It's been this way for years, but this trip to New York, this so-called vacation, really made me see how little I meant to them. My name is Samantha Ryder, and at this point, I'm used to being the one who gets overlooked, who handles everything, but is never actually part of anything. It all started when my mom, Julie, suggested we all go to New York for a long weekend. Her idea sounded nice at first: spend a couple of days seeing Broadway shows, visiting museums, eating at fancy restaurants. What's the harm in that? I thought. But I quickly realized what it was really about: them using me to organize everything. I'm the go-to planner in the family. That's always been my role. Ben, my older brother, is the golden child. He has this charisma that makes everyone around him swoon. Caroline, my younger sister, is, well, a bit of a mess. But no matter what, she always manages to charm her way out of trouble. And then there's me, the responsible one, the behind-the-scenes worker. I was the one who booked the flights, arranged the dinner reservations, found the tour guides, and secured the hotel. My family didn't appreciate it. I didn't even expect them to thank me. It's just what I do. I guess I've been doing it for so long that I never realized how draining it was. How much of myself I was giving without anything in return. The trip was chaotic from the start. Ben complained about the flight, even though it was smooth. Caroline was glued to her phone, texting her friends, barely acknowledging anyone. My parents, meanwhile, were discussing where we should eat lunch, like I wasn't already dealing with 100 other things to make sure everything went according to plan. But that's the role I've always played in this family, the fixer. The one who makes sure everything goes off without a hitch. And I didn't mind, at first. We landed in New York early in the morning, and it was a crisp, sunny day. I was already feeling a bit off, but I pushed it aside, knowing that I just had to keep going. We took a taxi to the hotel, the Langham, a luxury hotel in the heart of Manhattan. The moment we stepped into the lobby, I could see the excitement in my family's eyes. The glass chandeliers, the sleek floors, the elegant check-in desk, it was everything they wanted in a vacation, everything that made them feel important. I checked us in at the front desk, and as I did, I noticed something. My family was already talking among themselves about the plans for the evening, discussing what time we should get dressed, which show we were seeing. No one even looked at me. It was like I wasn't even there. When we walked to the suite, the moment we entered, my brother Ben claimed the biggest bed, as usual. Caroline went straight to the bathroom to start her skincare routine. My parents headed to the small balcony, already discussing what they'd do after dinner. And there I was, standing by the door, wondering where I was supposed to go. I had assumed there would be a bed for me, there usually was, but this time, there wasn't. The suite was booked for 3 people, not 4. I had forgotten to confirm the sleeping arrangements with the hotel, so I decided to go back down to the front desk to see if they had any rollaway beds available. As I approached the desk, the receptionist smiled at me and asked how she could assist. "Hi, I was wondering if you have any extra cots or rollaway beds. I'm not sure if you have a bed set up for me." The receptionist checked her computer screen for a moment before looking up at me, a slightly confused look on her face. "I'm sorry, but we only have a suite booked for 3 people. I can offer you a cot, but it might be a bit tight." I nodded, not really sure what I was expecting. "A cot would be fine," I replied. But as I turned around to head back to the room, I heard my father's voice from behind me. "Oh, she'll sleep in the closet, like last time," he said with a laugh. "She likes it cozy." I stopped dead in my tracks. The words hit me like a punch. The closet? I had to remind myself I was an adult now, but in that moment, I felt like a child again. It wasn't the first time my father had made a joke like that, but it stung worse now. It wasn't a joke, it was a reminder that I was always the one who was just there. Always out of the spotlight. Always the one who did all the work and never got any of the credit. I turned around slowly, my voice quiet but firm. Dad, no. I'm not sleeping in a closet this time. He gave me a quick glance, almost as if he didn't understand why I was even upset. Samantha, come on. Don't make a fuss. You've done this before. It'll be fine. I couldn't believe it. All the years of doing everything for them, of sacrificing my own comfort for their enjoyment, and this was how they treated me. The emotional weight of it hit me all at once. It wasn't just about the cot or the closet, it was everything that had built up over the years. The lack of recognition, the dismissive attitude, the constant feeling of being invisible in my own family. I didn't say anything more. I just turned and walked back to the suite, my heart heavy with frustration and sadness. I had spent so many years trying to prove my worth to them, but no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. And I was tired. The night was a blur. We went to the Broadway show, The Lion King, I think, but I wasn't really present. Ben and Caroline were laughing, talking, acting like they were living the dream. My parents were discussing dinner plans, already thinking ahead to what they'd do the next day. Meanwhile, I was just there, a ghost in the background. No one noticed how quiet I was, how distant I'd become. They never did. By the time we got back to the hotel, I couldn't take it anymore. I stayed up in the bathroom for a while, staring at myself in the mirror. Was this really my life? Was I just a function to them? A planner, a fixer, someone to take care of everything, but never someone to be acknowledged? When I came out of the bathroom, everyone was already getting ready for bed. I walked over to the small closet where I was supposed to sleep, the same closet I had slept in the last time I was on one of these trips. The memories of those moments, of feeling so alone, came rushing back. But something inside me snapped. I wasn't doing this anymore. I'm not sure how long I stood there before I decided what I needed to do, but it wasn't long. I grabbed my things, packed a small bag, and wrote a note. I wasn't going to stay in that suite, not like this. I left the note on the dresser and slipped out of the hotel room quietly, not wanting to wake anyone up. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I didn't care. All I knew was that I couldn't be there anymore. I wandered through the streets of New York that night, unsure of where to go. I eventually found an Airbnb in Soho, a tiny but cozy apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. It was peaceful. It was the first time in a long while I felt like I could finally breathe. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I explored the city, went to museums, tried restaurants I'd only ever dreamed of visiting. I didn't have to answer to anyone. I didn't have to make plans, didn't have to keep my family happy. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I didn't hear from them at all for 2 days. Not a text, not a call. When I finally got a message from my mom, it was brief. "Where are you? Everyone's asking about you." I didn't know how to respond. I waited. Finally, I sent a text back. "I'm fine. I just needed a break." And that was the truth. I needed space. I needed to be away from the constant demands, from the expectations. I wasn't sure if I was ever going back to that family dynamic where I was just the invisible one, but in that moment, I knew one thing for sure: I had to stop letting them use me. For the first time, I realized that it was okay to not be the one who fixed everything. The days that followed were quiet. I felt like I was finally learning how to live on my own terms. But I still wasn't sure where to go from here. How do you go back to a family that's always used you when you've finally figured out that you're worth more than what they've made you believe? I guess I'm still trying to figure that out. I spent a few more days in New York, and though I had the time to explore, part of me felt like I was just running away. It was a strange, uneasy freedom, like I was taking control, but at the same time, I felt this lingering guilt. I hadn't even spoken to my family since I left that note. I hadn't wanted to deal with their questions, their expectations. I kept telling myself I needed this time, that I deserved this time, but I also knew there would be consequences when I finally returned home. The Airbnb was small but comfortable. It was the kind of place I would never have booked for myself before, too far out of my comfort zone, too unfamiliar. But there was something soothing about it, something calming in the quiet that I hadn't realized I'd been missing. It was the first place I had stayed in a long time that was truly mine, no one else's expectations hanging over my head. I kept myself busy during the day, walking through Soho streets, finding new cafes to try, soaking in the art galleries. I went to the Met one day and stood in front of paintings for hours. I don't even know why I felt so drawn to them, but I think it was because they were art. They were things that didn't have to do anything. They just were. It felt good to just exist without having to be useful for once. By the third day, though, the loneliness started to settle in. I was in a city filled with people, but I felt disconnected. I missed my family, even though I was angry at them. It was a strange feeling, this push and pull between wanting to maintain the distance I had finally created and the nagging feeling that they were my family, that maybe I should just go back, let it all go. But every time I thought about it, I remembered how I'd felt when I walked away from the hotel, the frustration, the hurt. I wasn't sure how to fix this. I wasn't sure if it could even be fixed. Eventually, my mom reached out. The text was simple but direct. "Sam, where are you? We're all worried." I read it over and over, each time growing more frustrated. Why was I the one who always had to be the responsible one? Why was I the one everyone relied on, yet never thought twice about? I decided not to respond right away. Instead, I spent the day walking the streets of Greenwich Village, trying to clear my head. I didn't need them to worry about me. I had spent my life worrying about them. Why was it so hard to step back and focus on my own needs, for once? I found myself standing in front of a small bookstore in the village, a place I had been meaning to visit. I walked inside, surrounded by the smell of old paper and the quiet rustle of pages turning. It was so peaceful. I walked to the back of the shop and sat down on a chair in the reading nook, grabbing a book from the shelf. It was a biography of some artist I'd never heard of, but it didn't matter. It was mine. No one was telling me to hurry up or pick something better. For the first time in so long, I wasn't answering to anyone. That night, I didn't check my phone. I didn't want to hear my mom's voice telling me how disappointed they were in me. I didn't want to hear my father's offhand remarks about my dramatic behavior. I knew they'd say something like that. I was already preparing for the guilt trip that would inevitably come. But I also knew something else. I knew I couldn't go back to being the person I was before. I couldn't let them drag me back into that role. I was tired of being the one who held everything together. I was tired of feeling like I wasn't enough unless I was doing something for them. I needed to learn how to be just me, without feeling like I owed anyone anything. The next day, I finally answered my mom's text. "I'm in New York. I just needed some space. I'll come home in a couple of days." It wasn't much, but it was the truth. I couldn't promise them anything else. When I got back to the city and caught the train to Brooklyn, I felt the familiar tightness in my chest. The streets didn't feel as comforting anymore. They felt suffocating. I wasn't sure if it was because I had changed, or if it was because I had always been stuck in the same routine, doing the same things, over and over again. I got to the apartment and dropped my bag on the floor, looking around. The space felt different now. It was still my home, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had outgrown it somehow. Or maybe I had just outgrown the version of myself that had always been there. I didn't want to see anyone. I wanted to avoid the inevitable confrontation with my family. But that wasn't an option. They were expecting me to come back, expecting everything to be the same. It had always been this way, hadn't it? They'd expect me to slip back into my old role as if nothing had changed. But something had changed. I had changed. That night, my mom called. I stared at the phone for a while before answering, taking a deep breath. "Sam, we're really worried." Why didn't you tell us where you were? We were calling everywhere. I needed some time, Mom. I needed to think. I could hear her sigh on the other end of the line. But Sam, you can't just disappear like that. You're part of this family. I almost laughed at that. I had been part of the family, hadn't I? The part that did everything, took care of everything, while no one ever seemed to appreciate it. I'm always part of this family, Mom. But I can't be the one who does everything for everyone anymore. It's not healthy for me. I didn't know if she understood, but I wasn't ready to explain it all in that moment. She tried to reassure me, telling me it was just a misunderstanding, that they never meant to make me feel invisible, but I could hear the familiar undertones of guilt in her voice. We'll talk when you're ready to come home, she said softly. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't sure I was ready to come home. Not yet. The days that followed were a mixture of frustration and clarity. I found myself withdrawing more from my family, even when we were in the same room. They would try to make small talk, asking about my trip, but it felt shallow, like they didn't really care, like they just wanted everything to go back to normal. And maybe that was the problem. They wanted everything to go back to normal, but I didn't. I couldn't. The version of me they wanted to see, the one who was always accommodating, always fixing, always sacrificing, wasn't who I was anymore. I had spent so many years trying to make them happy, and in the process, I had lost myself. I wasn't sure how I would fix this. I wasn't even sure I wanted to fix it. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going back to being the person who put everyone else's needs ahead of mine. Not anymore. As the days went by, I began to realize that the hardest part wasn't being away from them. The hardest part was figuring out how to finally put myself first and stop letting them dictate my worth. I wasn't sure if I could ever get through to them. I wasn't sure if they'd ever understand. But I did know that I couldn't live like this anymore. It had been a week since I came back from New York, and the tension in the apartment was suffocating. My family had, as expected, reverted to their usual dynamic, Ben demanding things be done a certain way, Caroline continuing to flit from one drama to the next, and my parents, especially my mom, acting like nothing had changed. They expected me to fall back into my old routine, the one where I handled everything, fixed everyone's problems, and did all the emotional labor without any acknowledgement or thanks. But I wasn't going to let that happen. It wasn't just about the trip anymore. It wasn't even about the bed or the closet. This was about a lifetime of feeling invisible, a lifetime of being the person who was always expected to give without receiving anything in return. I had let it go on for too long, but now, I was done. I had spent the last few days quietly formulating a plan. I didn't want to make a dramatic scene, but I did want them to understand that they couldn't keep using me, taking me for granted. So, I decided to play a little game, one where I finally took control of the situation and turned the tables on them. The opportunity came when my parents announced they were planning a big family gathering. They'd always had these parties, where they invited distant relatives, friends, and colleagues. I had always been the one who arranged everything, the invites, the food, the venue, the seating, the decorations. They'd always counted on me to make everything perfect, and every time, they'd been ungrateful. This year, however, I wasn't going to let that happen. Instead of immediately jumping into action, I waited. I let them stew in their expectations, letting them think I'd fall in line. The invitations came in, big, lavish, formal invites, as they always did. I could already see my dad giving me that look, the one that said, "You'll handle everything, right?" But this time, I didn't respond. I ignored the calls. I didn't reply to the emails. When my mom casually asked what I was doing to prepare for the party, I simply said, "Nothing yet. I'm not sure if I'll be able to help this time." At first, they didn't understand. They assumed I was just being lazy or dramatic. But as the days passed and the party date approached, it became clear that something wasn't right. My mom started panicking. She called me, texted me, and even came over to ask if I could help organize things. That's when I finally decided it was time to make my move. I didn't want to be cruel or hurtful. I didn't want to cause any lasting damage. But I wanted them to understand the impact of their actions, the way they had always taken me for granted, the way they expected me to be the one to fix everything without ever acknowledging how much it cost me. I turned down their offers to help and explained that I had made other plans for the day. That was true, I was busy. But it wasn't what they thought. I had no intention of spending the day sitting at home, waiting for them to realize their mistake. The day of the event, I stayed away. I went to a cafe in the city, read a book, and enjoyed the peace I had so desperately needed. The party, of course, went on without me. My parents scrambled to try and handle things themselves. Ben was too busy chatting with his friends to focus on anything, and Caroline was, well, Caroline, distracted and oblivious. The gathering went off, but not smoothly. There were awkward pauses in conversation. The food wasn't quite as well arranged as it usually was. The decorations were off. The guests looked uncomfortable, unsure of what was going on. I didn't have to do anything. They were doing it all themselves, struggling to keep the show afloat without the one person who had always been behind the scenes, holding everything together. I could almost hear their growing frustration as the night went on. I checked my phone once or twice. There were a few missed calls from my mom, then a text message from her, "Sam, we're really in a bind. The caterer messed up, and we don't know how to handle the seating arrangement. Please, we need you." I didn't respond. Later that night, I received another text, "Sam, please come back. We don't know what we're doing. This is a disaster. Your dad is upset. You've always been the one to fix things." I let it sit for a moment, letting them stew in their mess, before I replied, "I know you don't want to hear this, but maybe this will be a lesson. I can't always be the one to fix everything. I'm not your personal event planner. I'm your daughter, and I deserve to be treated as such. I need respect. If you want me in your life, it's time to start valuing me for who I am, not just what I can do for you." The silence that followed felt heavy. It was as if the weight of my message had finally landed. It was the first time in years I had spoken up like that. For so long, I had been the one biting my tongue, afraid to upset the balance. But now, I was done being the invisible one. The next morning, my mom called again. This time, she sounded different, not panicked, but tired. "Sam," she said quietly, "we're sorry. We didn't realize how much we were taking you for granted. We didn't understand how much you've been carrying. I think we've been selfish." It wasn't an apology I had expected. It wasn't grand, and it wasn't enough to erase everything, but it was a start. My dad called later, too, and though his words were more reluctant, I could hear the sincerity behind them. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I guess I got used to you always being there." That was the turning point. I didn't have to shout, didn't have to cause a huge scene or demand they make it up to me with grand gestures. I simply stepped back. I let them see the chaos that came from not having me in the picture. I let them feel the discomfort of being the ones who had to manage things on their own for once. The most satisfying part wasn't just their apology, it was the realization that I didn't have to sacrifice myself to earn their respect or love. They were forced to see the value I brought to the table, not because I demanded it, but because I refused to do anything for them this time. From that point on, things were different. My family started asking me what I wanted. They checked in with me, acknowledged the work I had done for them in the past, and began to show me the respect I had been craving for years. Things didn't magically become perfect overnight, but that moment, when I stood my ground and walked away from their expectations, was the moment I took control of my life. I didn't need them to define my worth anymore. I was enough, on my own terms.